Tonight, Democrats approve the articles of impeachment to remove the commander-in-chief.
This has been a wild week.
The president accusing Democrats of trivializing impeachment. On the other side of the pond,
getting Brexit done is now the irrefutable, irresistible, unarguable decision of the British people.
A mandate to pull the UK out of the EU. And suicides among U.S. military veterans are reaching epidemic proportions. Plus,
I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry month of December. Now, May.
the last moonwalk on this very day nearly 50 years ago. All this and more tonight on Fake Nation. A consequential impeachment vote sets the stage for an epic political battle. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup. Well, a historic day in Washington. The House Judiciary Committee voting along party lines to approve 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump, which tees up a full House vote next week. CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson has the latest.
After hours of heated debate, the House Judiciary Committee met for less than 10 minutes this morning before voting to send the 2 articles of impeachment to the House floor with a favorable recommendation.
Today is a solemn and sad day.
Aye.
Following the historic vote, Chairman Jerry Nadler kept his remarks brief, taking no questions.
The House will act expeditiously.
Republican committee members, however, held nothing back.
You don't get to remove a president because you don't like him.
Calling the process a kangaroo court and urging Senate Republicans to call witnesses in their trial.
The country needs to hear what a farce this was. They really need to bring in witnesses. They're the chance to clean this mess up, and I sure hope they will.
President Trump also sounded off.
It's a witch hunt, it's a sham, it's a hoax.
Claiming Democrats are making fools of themselves.
You're trivializing impeachment. And I tell you what, someday there'll be a Democrat president and there'll be a Republican House, and I suspect they're going to remember it.
As the House prepares for a vote next week, Democrats will need 216 votes to impeach the president. 31 Democrats represent districts President Trump carried in 2016, and the House majority can only afford to lose 17 of those votes to impeach Trump. Back to you, John.
Thank you, Abby. And while the impeachment drama moves full steam ahead, a new deal between China and the United States is putting the brakes on the ongoing trade war. President Trump is touting the limited deal as a historic phase 1 in the long-term trade negotiations with China. The initial agreement would reduce tariffs on Chinese goods in exchange for Beijing stepping up purchases in America's agricultural sector.
And that's going to be one of the great deals ever, and it's going to ultimately lead to the opening of China, which is something that is incredible, because that's a whole big untapped market of 1.5 billion people.
The trade war truce cancels the next round of tariffs the United States was set to impose Sunday. Well, conservatives in Britain now have the largest majority in Parliament since Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s. Their win came after Prime Minister Boris Johnson campaigned relentlessly to make Brexit finally happen, following years of political fighting before and after the 2016 British vote to pull out of the EU.
This election means that getting Brexit done is now the irrefutable, irresistible, unarguable decision of the British people. And with this election,
Johnson says leaving the EU by the end of January means the United Kingdom will take back control of its laws, borders, monetary, and immigration system. Well, joining us now for our Faith Nation panel, CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody and Julia Manchester, political reporter at The Hill. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
No matter where you stand, whether you support the president or oppose the president, it's been a really somber and historic day. What does this mean for the nation?
You know, I think it really solidifies this feeling of partisanship within the nation. And I think for a while we saw this coming. I think our Republicans and supporters of the president would say that this has been a goal of Democrats ever since President Trump took office in 2017. But Democrats say that President Trump needs to be called on this behavior. But, you know, this comes ahead of an election next year. And, you know, I think we are seeing historic levels of partisanship. And this is very much reflected in that. And I think this is only where you're going to see more of a somber, divided mood as we go into 2020.
David, we saw Jerry Nadler even come out, and he had such a short statement saying this is a sad, somber day.
It is a very sad day for America. What does this mean for the future specifically? I mean, look, ultimately, impeachment obviously is serious business, and this has to be a situation where it should be bipartisan. It really should not be partisan. But forget that for a moment. How about just support from the American people? It's divided. I mean, as a matter of fact, you have the latest poll shows 50-45 actually against impeachment. The point is that Democrats never saw the uptick in polling. They never saw the support grow like it with Richard Nixon back in the 70s. So you got to 60-65%, and then the writing was on the wall. Here, you never had that. And if you don't have the support of the American people on something so important like this, I think that's why it's somber, it's sad, because you don't have consensus, and that's a problem.
Speaking of the polls, and to Julia's point about polarization, President Trump responded today saying that Democrats are trivializing impeachment. How might impeachment be wielded in the future, do you think? David, let's start with you.
Well, first of all, I think that when the House Judiciary Committee had that vote today, they didn't just vote for 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump. I believe they just voted for the next Democrat president to be impeached by a Republican-led House, and I mean that. In other words, look, if they're going to do this, then what's the next House that's controlled by the Republicans to impeach a Democrat president on, let's say, a Benghazi-type scandal or Fast and Furious? I mean, that's where this has come to. Or my concern is that's where we're going here in America, and that gets back to the somber, sad part of all of this.
Well, of course, this sets the stage for the next phase, which is in the Senate. Let's talk about the reported split between Leader Mitch McConnell in the Senate and the White House about calling witnesses to the trial. Why the split?
You know, I think there is a split as to, if, Republicans are calling witnesses to the trial or Democrats calling witnesses to the trial, how that will essentially play out, in this very public manner. You've heard a lot of Republicans floating the idea of calling Joe Biden or even Hunter Biden to testify. I don't really think that will necessarily happen. I think you will get a lot of documents that are subpoenaed and, more evidence, if you will. But, it's very important that Republicans in the Senate and the president are lockstep in this, and they need to have a unified messaging strategy on this. That's very important for President Trump, especially as he's going into a re-election.
And just real quick, none of these controversial witnesses would ever be called, because even if Republicans wanted to call them, the Romneys, Murkowski, Susan Collins, they're not going to vote for Hunter Biden to testify, for example. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to have the 50-plus votes or the 50 votes that they're going to need to even call these witnesses.
David, in about a half minute, in terms of the presidential election, how will impeachment play out in some of these critically important swing states in 2020?
Well, we're already seeing some polling. I mean, I think Julia can speak to that. But some of these swing states we're seeing, like Wisconsin, Michigan, and other places, that, it's a big concern for Democrats here. Look, Nancy Pelosi, this is what she was afraid of happening. And here it is. It's potentially about to happen. And as I've said before, I believe that this is setting up for Donald Trump to have some sort of a landslide, as much as a landslide you can have in 2020, but a landslide victory in 2020. And I think a lot of other states could be in play.
All right, David, Julia, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Well, in non-impeachment news, sponsors of a new bill in Congress want a federal expansion of both religious freedom and gay rights. They call it Fairness for All and say it's a better deal for people of faith than the controversial Equality Act the House passed last spring. Heather Sells joins us now to report on the new proposal. Heather?
Right, John. The bill is known as Fairness for All. It expands the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to include sexual orientation and gender identity. It also provides exemptions for religious liberty.
And that's key for people of faith who have watched their protections decline while those for LGBTQ people have grown. In New York, wedding business owner Cynthia Gifford had to pay state fines after refusing a same-sex ceremony on her property.
When the government tells you what to say and punishes you if you don't, is scary stuff.
Christian colleges and universities have also faced a host of religious liberty battles so they worked to frame the bill.
It's very important in America to be able to teach and to have policies that reflect a conservative, orthodox, and historical position on marriage. And we want to make sure there's no penalty around those beliefs in the future.
A small group of gay activists have also pursued the bill. They say it's a far better deal for people of faith than the Radical Equality Act, which House Democrats passed unanimously last spring.
And eventually, both of these sides and both of these bills are going to have to start working together to find something that can actually pass both chambers of Congress and be signed by a president.
The bill's Republican sponsor, Utah Representative Chris Stewart, says it's time for lawmakers to resolve the country's debate over religious liberty.
I think it's better for us in society if the courts don't have to resolve these issues one at a time, often in conflicting findings and over many, many years, that leads to uncertainty and, in too many cases, strife and conflict.
But conservatives at the Heritage Foundation and Alliance Defending Freedom say the religious liberty protections are weak, and that elevating sexual orientation and gender identity to a protected class will harm liberty, privacy, and safety.
There are many of us who believe that this bill concedes far, far, far too much and undermines the interests of young people who are suffering from gender dysphoria, of their parents, of women and girls who want to compete on an equal playing field in athletics.
Those backing fairness for all say people of faith need an alternative to the Equality Act, which most believe would severely threaten religious liberty. They believe fairness for all could lead to a long-term discussion and solution with the LGBTQ community. John?
So, Heather, how is the LGBT community reacting to this bill?
Well, what I think is really interesting about this bill is that you had both LGBT activists and people of faith coming together, sitting around the table to draft it, to think through it. That said, on the day that the bill was announced, the Human Rights Campaign, which is really the biggest LGBTQ civil rights organization in the country, called it dangerous and opposed it, along with many other LGBTQ organizations. So definitely not an embrace by the LGBT community, just a small group of them supporting it.
Sure. And Heather, what's the likelihood this bill will pass through Congress? Does it have meaningful support, or is this really just a starting point?
Well, as I mentioned, it's a small group of LGBT activists and a small group of people of faith who are supporting it. So they are really saying, look, we want to be, especially the people of faith are saying, we want to be thought leaders. We don't want to just oppose the Equality Act. We want to come to the table with something. So yes, they do see this as a starting point and something that can keep them in the game for the long term.
All right, Heather Sells, thank you for keeping us abreast of this bill. Thank you so much and have a great weekend. When we come back, the effort to turn the tide on the startling suicide rate among U.S. military veterans. That story next.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel, now available at cbnradio.com.
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
Prophecy thousands of years old.
We were called to be a light to the world.
Being fulfilled today. Discover how. Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life. Just call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he have, which color he is, this is what I'm doing.
See how the people of Israel are fulfilling prophecy
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
by sharing their knowledge
In Africa, in Asia, in South America, in East Europe.
and their love.
This is how we work. This is us.
Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com.
Welcome back. Suicide among active duty military and veterans is on the rise. Last year alone, more than 500 American service members committed suicide. Combat missions and post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, are the driving factors for military suicides. This week, members of Congress held congressional hearings in both the House and Senate to address the unique burdens of military life, leading to mental health problems and suicide. Earlier, we spoke to the co-founder of a veterans group participating in a roundtable on Capitol Hill.
We are told that veterans not too long ago at 22 a day were taking their lives, which is just an incredible number. And to put that in perspective, it's an easy number to say, but you think about every hour of every day, 365 days a year, someone who served our country taking their life, which is atrocious. We're in a unique time in our country where the problem is huge, the solution is not apparent, and so particularly active duty commanders who are dealing with this situation look around and they say, we need something that works, and we don't care what that is. And Mighty Oaks, and not just Mighty Oaks, other organizations like ours have a proven track record of working. We've had about 3,200 folks come through our program, most of them very successfully. We've had research done on our program. This year we'll have about 800 students, so we're growing exponentially. We're about to the point of having 1,000 students a year. So we've had an impact, we have a track record, and the question was, how can we help outside of the VA or the clinical programs?
What happens in these programs?
Yeah. So a veteran will come to the program, and on day one, he'll be met with others who are on our staff, who are serving, who will stand up and say something like this: I know where you're coming from because I've been there. I've struggled in my marriage. I've attempted suicide. I've been down the same road that you've been down. I don't have it all figured out, but I'm a few steps further down the road than you are, and I want to take you with me. And then over the next 5 days, and 5 days is a short period of time, but over the next 5 days, we'll talk about how really the solution to trauma, if you will, is to not forget about it or get over it, or any of those things we like to say.
Put it in a box.
Right, put it in a box, shove it down. They've been doing that. Really, the solution is aligning your life to the person that God created you to be. And if you can align your life to that person, then you move forward. What's in the past is in the past, but it no longer has a hold over you.
How do you get over the social stigma when it comes to addressing some of these issues?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a stigma attached to that. I think that folks who need help often are the last people to ask for help. One of the, I think, important things about the Mighty Oaks Foundation is that we are outside of the clinical model. So when someone comes to our program, they can come and they can call it a retreat, they can call it a leadership retreat, they can call it whatever they want to. And about half of those who attend our program are active duty service members. So they can come to us. What happens when they're with us is not reported in their medical record book or anywhere else. So they can get the help that they need, get a new perspective, and get down the road a little bit, and go back to their job. And really, no one needs to know what their issues are, what they're dealing with.
Can you, given the ministry background, address a little bit of what's causing this from a spiritual perspective?
You lose your identity because you've separated from friends, you've separated from the uniform, you've separated from purpose, you've separated from meaning, and now you find yourself in a place that you don't understand. And that loss of identity is absolutely it's damning. It destroys relationships, it destroys purpose, it destroys hope. And without trying to oversimplify or over-spiritualize the traumatic issues that so many folks are dealing with, so much of the time, I believe it's a loss of identity and a lack of understanding who I really am. Not what have I done, but who am I really? When we can align to the identity that's been given to us by Jesus Christ, the problems don't go away, the issues don't go away, the past doesn't go away, but there's hope because we have an identity, and it's not in us, it's in our Creator.
Coming up, was Jesus a socialist? It's a question we posed to Charlie Kirk. Hear why he says the Savior of the world was above the politics of mankind when we come back.
Too often we carry baggage from our past. You know what it's like. It affects everything and everyone in our lives. It's always there, weighing us down and keeping us from achieving true happiness. But do you know God never meant for us to be trapped in the past? You can be free of your baggage. Learn how God's forgiveness leads to changed lives and new beginnings. Call the 700 Club.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5, Wednesday night at 9:30.
Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears.
Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com to get your copy today.
Well, it's no secret liberals aren't fans of President Trump. The next person you're about to meet might be a close second. David Brody recently spoke to Charlie Kirk, founder of the conservative student organization Turning Point USA, who's also seen as an unplugged firebrand on social media.
John, Charlie Kirk is also now one of the founders of the new Falkirk Center at Liberty University. You know, Kirk's a Bible-believing Christian, and he's teamed with Liberty's President Jerry Falwell Jr. to educate and fight back against the assault on Judeo-Christian values. So here's some of that interview, and it was during our visit to our Faith Nation studios where he talked about socialism, Christianity, and the rise of atheism in America.
The fastest growing religion in America is atheism. And I challenge Christians to be as bold and evangelistic and persuasive as atheists are. And sometimes Christians don't. And so there's two ways that you can. This is way oversimplified, but basic two ways I see Christians dealing in this atheist world. One, there's a philosophy that we should be 100% correct theologically, but go create our own communities and never talk to anyone externally. Basically becoming pseudo-monks in the hills. Or the other, which is what I like to embrace, and what Jerry Falwell believes at Liberty, is go forth into the world. Understand you're going to be persecuted, you're going to be called names, you're going to lose friends, especially getting involved in civic engagement and political engagement, but understanding the fulfillment of the gospel of Jesus Christ as being the salt and light that he calls us to be. And look, I mean, our values are under assault every single day, under a secular, atheist, leftist, Marxist movement within our government, within our culture, within higher education. And our failure to recognize that and do something about it might be the end of America.
By the way, the rise of socialism, a huge deal. By the way, have you heard Jesus is a socialist? I don't know if you heard that.
No, that's nonsense. I hear this all the time.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. I saw that.
I'm happy to debunk that, too.
Well,
that's
why don't you do so? Because there's a younger generation that's believing
Well, the
this
fact that Jesus was anything except the savior of the world is preposterous to me. That somehow he was something of a working class philosophy in the mid-1800s. Somehow that's what he was, when 1,800 years earlier he was dying for our sins and being, you know, a lot bigger than just some sort of political philosopher. Time and time again, a couple points. Time and time again, Jesus Christ was given the opportunity to get engaged in government. He was a much higher calling than that. Think about it. He's one of the only people ever in documented history to have such a widespread impact outside of political government influence. So even if you look at Napoleon, look at Muhammad, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, they worked through the instruments of government. Jesus was like, that's not why I'm here. Right. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but I'm above all of it. Give unto God what is God's. God's dominion is what we're all under. And so, but he didn't argue for any sort of specific governmental structure intentionally. Number two, everything he called as far as helping the poor, the Matthew 5, essentially, the Sermon on the Mount, the charge for us Christians, it starts and ends with the individual calling, not the collective calling. It's super important that you can't abdicate your own responsibility to somebody else, to some other authority except yourself. You yourself give up your cloak and your tunic. You yourself turn the other cheek. Now that's hard, because you want to give up that kind of, oh, no, it's somebody else's responsibility. No, you go help the poor individual that needs to be clothed, that needs to be fed, that needs to be taken care of. That's a call of individual responsibility.
All right, politics. Look, how does it feel to be basically hated every day by the liberals?
Great. I mean, I have comfort in why I believe what I believe. I get protested from Berkeley, Stanford, UCLA, UT Austin, University of Florida. I just, the hate, I mean, I know this sounds silly. It just doesn't bother me. I know why I believe what I believe. I embrace any sort of backlash. I love discussion. And look, under the most harsh fires is where the most amazing iron can be cast. And I find that to be definitely the case. The more I travel, the more kind of protests I get, the more people I talk to, the more I understand why I believe what I believe.
Coming up, remembering the end of an era, we take a look at this day in history.
It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
From Washington, D.C., uncompromising stories, interviews, and analysis from veteran journalists David Brody.
Escalating fight.
Jenna Browder.
Chose his words carefully.
Ben Kennedy.
Plan to join him.
And Amber Strong.
For impeachment grows a little bit louder.
Bringing you the political news that matters.
We get out and tell the story of the progress that we're making in this country.
Watch Faith Nation, weeknights at 6 on the CBN News Channel.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
As the nations rage, you can stand with Israel.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
Call 1-800-700-7000 and get to life.
This is our nature as a country.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he has, which color he is. This is what I'm doing.
Support Israel in their time of need. Get to Life, now available on DVD. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
And I wish that other people throughout the world could see this side of Israel.
Well, finally tonight, sometimes our fixation with moving forward makes us forget where we've been. So we thought it might be an appropriate opportunity today to take time and look back on this day nearly 50 years ago.
I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry, merry month of December. May.
A catchy tune there. Manned by jovial astronauts Eugene Cernan, Ronald Evans, and Harrison Schmitt, today in 1972, the last time man went to the moon. The Apollo 17 mission broke multiple records: the longest moon landing, longest time in lunar orbit, longest moonwalks, and largest lunar sample. NASA has discovered other manned lunar missions, hoping to place astronauts on the moon again by 2024. Well, have a great weekend, everyone, and thanks for watching Faith Nation.